Good evening, everybody, and welcome. My name is Nancy Easterling, and it is my honor to serve as the Executive Director of Historic Sotterly. We are so glad that you are here tonight for our next presentation in our Sotterly Presents People and Perspectives series. This is part of our Common Ground initiative. If you're not familiar with our Common Ground initiative, please do look it up on our website. It is coming together as a community, often with our descendants, having conversations, dialogues, talking about equity, trying to learn about the past and ourselves to discover that common ground and come in and move forward together. And we are excited to be sponsoring this series this year with two wonderful organizations who have been with us for so long. The Maryland Humanities and the Maryland Heritage Area are making the Common Ground events possible this year. So our thanks to them. I already see a lot of people signing into the chat. I'm excited. Thank you so much. Sign into the chat. Let us know where you are joining us from tonight. When you have questions later, you'll notice up beside the chat button, there's also a Q&A button. That is where you can put your questions. I know you're going to have so many of them. And as you think about them, just stick them in the Q&A and we'll have them lined up after the presentation tonight. Now, our speaker tonight is going to be introduced by Jeannie in just a moment. I just want you to know I am so excited. He is such a dear friend to us, has been for so long. And I know you are going to learn so much and be so entranced by him tonight with his presentation. So you're here to see him. You're not here to see me. So let me pass this off to our wonderful Director of Programming and Partnerships, Miss Jeannie Perlow. Take it away, Jeannie, to introduce tonight's speaker.
Hello and welcome, everyone. Just a reminder, we have a Q&A area up there, so you can put your questions in there for the Q&A portion. So as Director of both the Study of Legacy of Slavery in Maryland and the Maryland State Archives Research Department and the Utopia Film Festival in Greenbelt, Maryland, Chris earned his BA in English with drama minor at the University of Maryland, College Park, and resides in Landover. His script for The Studio, which focused on the plight of the homeless, earned an individual artist grant from the Maryland State Arts Council in 2001. His script for the Reconciliation Walk for Slavery and Penitence, held in Annapolis, Maryland in the fall of 2004, helped garner the Maryland Tourism Council Global Marketing Award for the Kunta Kinte Alex Haley Foundation. His literary works include 2 books of poetry, Obsessions and Until the Right One Comes Along, the radio play The Courtship of Joe and Eddie, 2 of his self-penned, produced, and directed short film works, The Studio and B&B, opened simultaneously at the Greenbelt Utopia Film and Video Festival and Annapolis Film Festivals in 2005. His next book of poetry, My Mind Has Many Windows, is slated for publication later in 2022. He co-directed, co-produced, and co-wrote the Capital Region Emmy-nominated documentary Unmarked on graves and cemeteries of free and enslaved African Americans. And welcome, Chris. We're so glad to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Jeannie. I'm so glad to be had.
So,
cheers to everyone. This is
going to be fun. Yeah, this is going
to. In honor of Jane, the pink is red circle that she has. She had the red table. I have the red cup. So it's not really filled with anything, unfortunately. But it's the thought that counts, right?
Right. So, Chris, please tell us about your own parents and upbringing. I know that's and your extended family. I know that's really important to know. A lot of people are really curious about your family, especially.
Thank you very much, Jean. Well, I guess it all started in that little log cabin. I didn't really think I'd be in the log cabin, but there was Abraham Lincoln and there was me. And I said, come on, Abe, you're going to be president one day. And he said, no, I won't. I said, trust me. I put a bet on it. It's crazy things. But I was born in Washington, D.C., and My parents were, see, my mother was a stay-at-home mom until she was 40 years old. So I actually was very benefited by the fact that for those formative years of my life, I was able to walk to school for until I was in, I think, seventh grade, and I would come home and my mother would literally be there to fix me lunch. And it was just, in retrospect, it was just such an amazing thing, and it was such a very sweet thing, which a kid takes for granted when you have that. And to think about today, when so many families have both parents working, and you go off to school, and you probably are at such a distance that you can't have that daily interaction with one of your parents, which is even to the point of how so many times when we talk about dinner, it's like at dinner, it's like, well, what happened in your day? I could tell my mother what happened at the first half of my day, and then she could give me some advice and what have you, and then scoop me back off for the second half of the day. And that was just kind of an amazing reality that I had until she was 40, as I said, and then she started working at the Recorder of Deeds office in Washington, D.C., which is, as far as the circle goes around and around and around. Years later, I end up being at the archives at the Maryland State Archives in Annapolis, Maryland, whose, I guess you could say, sister or brother or cousin agency would be the Recorder of Deeds in Washington, D.C., whose responsibility it also is to save and record and preserve and make accessible records in DC, and I'm in the place where it's recorded and saved and made accessible for the state of Maryland. And I would never have thought that when I was 10 years old, or through those many years that I was at home with my mother. My father was an architect, worked at the David Taylor Naval Research Center, and he worked there for, I guess, about 25 or so years, right out of the Howard University. And I think the most special times I remember about that was that there were a couple of times I would go there, and they had, I think we still have this today sometimes, the bring a kid to the office day. And I remember going there, and again, you're so young, you don't really get the breadth of what your parent might be doing, but you still are kind of excited, as I was, about this whole big office. And as an architect, much of what he did to me looked like fun things that I did as a kid, which is having a pad and he's writing on it with a pencil, which of course is in the archives world. A pencil was all you're supposed to use anyway, because you don't want to use a pen and mess something up. But in an architectural world, you have mechanical pencils, and you have these type of things which are very finite with what they do. And my father had these big sketch pads, and the people around here were sketching. So to me, it almost seemed like it was this artistic endeavor, in difference to thinking about the people who are working here are writing the designs that buildings are made from, or houses such as the one I lived in are made from. And I don't think I really realized that till probably I was in, I guess, late grade school or high school. My brother was always big into the sports as a wrestler, and also an artist himself. So I guess what's very surprising about that whole upbringing is that the synergy of it is that I ended up going into records management, sort of like my mother did for her first job, and my brother ended up going into the arts from an illustrative way, as my father did as an architect. And of course, the other thing is that my mother was always big into movie stars and actors and actresses and recording artists, to the point where I know those of us who aren't in denial about how they were as a child will think about how you get so annoyed when your parent will call you when you're someplace on the phone with a friend, or just on your video game or whatever, and your parent will call you and you're just playing, and the last thing you want to be is bothered. And I was the same way, except when my mother would ask me about what the name of this TV star or movie star was. And then whenever that was a point, wherever I was, Gene, I would come running, because it was beyond anything that we could put our heads together, figure out, oh, well, that's the person who was on that game show, and they were a guest show on this other TV show, and what is their name, and beating our heads back and forth until we came up with it. And once we did that, then I would go back to my room and do whatever I was doing, and my mother would be satisfied to watch TV. But that I think is part of what stayed in me in my earlier career, which is still a part of me now, as being an actor and a writer and being a performer, because that never left me. It started at the beginning, and it's here's today, even as I'm speaking to you now. There's a note for you. From Sound of Music.
Okay, so did you want to show your family slides now, or part of them, or wait?
Some of them. Some of these. The first slide that I'm going to show here. Let me see if I can get to it. This is something that doesn't. Now let me go past this. Although it takes a little while to get past this. Is something people should keep in their minds, because old pictures are. Whenever, if you were to ever invite me to your house and you had old pictures, you might as well just stop and pause, because I will have already stopped and looked at whatever old pictures you have in your house. So just be aware of that. Old pictures are a magnet to me wherever I am. So this is in the first house I remember living in, 216 Whittier Street. I don't live there now, so don't come knocking at the door. Just the people who are there will be very shocked. He doesn't live here. But this is in our kitchenette. That's my grandfather, Simon Haley. That's my mother, Ida Dolores Haley. And that's my brother, Alan. And that's me, cheesing right then and there already with one of my favorite things, which is a big old picture of sweet tea, which is just my ideal thing. And my grandfather Alex, my uncle Alex, this is his father, Simon Haley, who lived with us in Washington, D.C. for about the first 5 or 6 years of my life. So this is a precious picture. I'm just so happy to still have that. And in the previous picture, this is Granddad, as I called him, with his 4 children. And this is in our Uncle George's house. And Uncle George is the gentleman who's standing next to this guy who you may recognize, although this is very early. He came to write some books. One of them was made into a little movie called Roots anyway. So that's Alex Haley there with this tie. We called him Uncle Palmer. Uncle George is next to him. Aunt Lois is the young lady who's standing next to my father, Julius. And I'm pretty sure, because of how young he looks here, is that this is probably, oh, you know what? I think this is absolutely before Roots came out, because my grandfather passed away in 1973. So this is Uncle Alex, as again we called him, Uncle Palmer, before Roots came out. So that's kind of surprising too. And then another picture here, see if I can get to it. And that's at our house in Landover, Maryland, with my mother and my father, my brother and myself, a couple of years after we had been sitting at the dinner table eating with my grandfather, as you can tell there. I'm probably around the years of when I was doing theater all the time, and or in college. I could have been in college there. Yeah, so there's my father, the architect, my mother, the housewife, the person who loved theater and the arts as much as I did and do to this day, and also who worked in the Recorder of Deeds in Washington, D.C., and my brother, also the artist and wrestler and a track star, and me, the person who likes to show off red plastic cups at presentations. Yeah. Now, as far as, do you want me to go into these pictures, or what's the next question that you have?
Well, we can revisit any of these pictures you want to at any time. So it's all up to you.
Sure.
Okay. So if you want to put them aside right now or continue, you can.
Okay, we can continue.
Okay.
I'll
All
see
right.
if I have any questions. I'll see if whatever your question is, if any of these pictures will relate to it.
Okay. So, um, most people know you are the nephew of the famous author, Alex Haley. But what are the blessings of this for you personally, and what were and are the burdens?
Okay. I would say, well, the blessing is that I I would say it allows me to have a perspective into a peculiar, I'm going to say situation, and that's probably not the best word to use, but into a reality that many of us probably don't have and don't believe we will ever have. So, because it wasn't right at the beginning, like when I was born or when I was of an age to understand, that I'm able to see both sides of the coin, so to speak. And what I mean by that is that for many years of my life, while I was still a kid, so I was still pretty young, I had a relative, just as I showed you right there in the picture, who was my uncle. And that's how I knew him. He was my father's brother. And every now and then he would come by and he would visit. And I knew he was a writer. However, he wasn't someone that I would see on TV or see written about in the newspapers or things. That he was just my uncle who would come by, and literally one of the things I remember fondest about Uncle Palmer, or Uncle Alex, as I'll go to what people say right now. We called him Uncle Alex because once he became famous, everybody else did. But again, before then, he was Palmer because that's a family name. He would give my brother and I $10 bills. And so we're little bitty kids, and we were like rich. We just thought the best of the fact that this uncle who was the oldest of the four siblings would give us these $10 bills. And as a little kid, you get $1, you feel pretty good. And I will tell all of your viewers today that I have a website, and if you want to send me $10 today, I won't turn it down. I'm just saying, just put it out there that $10 is $10. So it's happy hour somewhere. Yeah. Anyway, so that was just something that I always remember. And then when he became famous, when Roots came out, it just changed the whole, not the perception for myself or for our family, but for a perception of how celebrity is perceived and is received by others. Because we had lived for many years with this person who's your father's oldest brother, who would give you $10 bills, and he would come around and he was doing things which we knew purported to be important, so to speak, which is to say that he was often speaking at the Library of Congress, and he would give talks about this book he was doing. And I don't remember if I ever went to them, because they were at night and they would be long talks, at least 2 hours, if not 3 hours. But that's why he mostly would be in town in DC, because he was giving a talk at the Library of Congress, and it was always about this book that he was doing. And this was year after year after year after year. And it was to the point that even as a young child, I started to think, and I literally, this is not something I'm just, deja vu. I remember, this is something I specifically remember thinking. This book is never coming out. And why do these people keep paying to see my uncle give these talks about this book that's never coming out? It was really the thought. And then the other thing that happened, which I distinctly remember, and I don't know if people believe in, I guess, manifestation or whatever, or I distinctly remember thinking about, because Uncle Alex kept doing this, that he kept coming back and he kept writing, and he had already written the autobiography of Malcolm X, which I had not read for the longest time, because my parents, as I recall, they didn't keep it away from me, they didn't hide it from me, but there was a distinct feeling that this book may be too militant for a little 6, 7, 8, 9-year-old. I mean, this is after the book had already come out. And so obviously at one point, it's not a type of book I want. There weren't really many pictures in there. And I knew who Malcolm X was. But again, as a little bitty kid, it's like, who is this person? And I think by the time I realized who he was, he had passed away. So it was the longest time before I read it. But I knew Uncle Alex was involved. He had talked to him. But again, this is before his name was on the title. It was just the autobiography of Malcolm X, maybe in small print with the assistance of Alex Haley inside the cover, whereas now it's on the front of the cover. So then Uncle Alex becomes huge, and he becomes world renowned. And when he would come into the city when he would come anywhere to do a talk and we would go see him, it was a very different perception, because then we're almost pushed out of the way by other people who are looking at him as this celebrity. And there's this element of not believing a celebrity is a real person. So when you see them in real life, you're sort of stunned, you're nervous, you're excited, and you want to touch this person. You want to be in their presence because you've only seen them on a big screen. You've only read about them in TV, but they exist. And you who have known this person for years, and you sort of just want to hang out with them, you can't, because literally other people have pushed you out of the way. And that was something. It was hard to accept, because you feel like, excuse me, do you know I'm his little nephew? I deserve to be there. And they're like, did not care, did not worry them at all, because they weren't about you. They were about the man of the hour. And so that's helped me perceive of how it is when I see someone else who knew my uncle, who's very famous or world renowned or what have you, and how it reminds me that they are just a person, and to try to treat them as just a person, to be kind, to be respectful, to not try to, I guess, barge into their reality. I remember, quite frankly, one time when I think it was when Uncle Alex had passed away, and we went to his funeral ceremony in Henning, Tennessee, and after the ceremony was over, the main ceremony was over, we were all downstairs eating in this hall, and it was a general church. It wasn't any grand place. It was a church where we were in a regular, very large center reception area, where people were just sitting down to probably eat some soul food, and Cicely Tyson was there with I think her manager, and I remember thinking that I was feeling very shy, very, 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 I guess, nervous about going up to her. But she was, as a person who really appreciated film and actresses, and someone who was in Roots, I wanted to say hi. And I thought, quite frankly, I had the right to say hi, because she played my 6 times great grandmother Binta. Of course I could say hi. And so I waited till the crowds were down, and it really was just her and this gentleman who was next to her. And I walked over to say hi, and she was in the middle of eating. And I think that she tried to look up and she tried to say hi. And I think whoever was with her, manager said, could you just wait a bit? She's trying to eat. And I thought, oh, and of course, then I felt so bad. I felt so awful, because I felt like I am being like what I'm supposed to know I shouldn't be. I'm intruding on someone's space when they're just trying to be a regular person. They're just trying to eat their chicken leg or whatever it was at that time. And I felt just so small at that time. But that's what has sort of helped me see both sides of the coin of being a celebrity, but that a celebrity is still a person and has those still same needs, desires, wants, moments of being tired, moments of being energized, moments of feeling on the spot, and moments of wanting to just kick back and relax, if at all possible, and find a friend or find a family member that they can just be whoever they really are for a moment, without having to represent who somebody else thinks they are because they've seen them on TV or read about them in the newspaper or in a magazine article. So that's part of the aspect that I have from this relationship with Uncle Alex. But also the thing is that it's certainly given me many opportunities. I think even though from my own interests, I decided to go into genealogy, I've always been big into African American history. From my youngest days, my grandmother, Ziona, bought me a book called The American Heritage History of the Negro in America, which shows you how old this book was. And I was just fascinated by all the people who were Black, in addition to Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass and George Washington Carver, were in this book. And I was fascinated from that time with Black history, and I've always been that way. So that was before Uncle Alex blew up. And also, I was always big into theater, always big into plays. As I mentioned with my mother, always idolized movie stars and what they did. And I would read biographies of famous movie stars and actors and actresses and singers and performers, because it's always what I wanted to be. And as a young kid, I used to draw and color my own comic books. I mean, literally, that's what I did because I loved comic books. And this is, God knows, decades before Marvel and DC comics are things that kids who grow up now, they're so used to. They're used to the next big Marvel movie. That wasn't happening when I was growing up. The comic books were the comic books, and the movie was what you played in your mind when you flipped the pages. So I drew my own comic books as well when I was a kid. So when Uncle Alex blew up, the other thing it was hard for me not to think of is that, oh my gosh, how can this help me? Just be brass tacks. How can this help me? Because as I said about manifestation earlier, I always thought, what would it be like to have a famous relative? I literally thought that so many times because he kept going back and forth into DC to give these talks. It would be sold out, and yet the book never came out. And he wasn't a big, iconic, historic, famous person. And then it happened. And I remember at least 3 or 4 years, I distinctly was having that thought in my mind. What would it be like if I had a famous relative? So for all those persons who are out there listening and they're thinking, does manifestation ever work? I don't know. I mean, maybe it did, because I didn't say, what would it like for me to be a famous person? I thought, what would it be like to have a famous relative? And then it happened. I had this famous relative. And as you said, Jeannie, it's been a blessing, because I'm sure a lot of the speaking presentations or invitations I get have a lot to do with the fact of my relation to Alex Haley, which I think magnifies the fact that I spend my life also working in African American history and working in genealogy. It is two passions of my life, along with theater. So my relation to Alex Haley and my day job meshed together to, I guess, create a more interesting package, and perhaps because I have training as an actor, I can present a little bit more enthusiastically or energetically, or with a more of an entertaining slant or approach than someone else who doesn't have that background. However, at the same time, there's a part of me that wishes I was huge and famous and iconic, because it's what I always imagined and always idolized in others. And the fact that as I was growing up, I didn't achieve that was often a situation which I felt that I had failed in some way, or something. I wasn't successful enough because I had not become as big as some of these people I had idolized. And yet here in my own family, it's happened. And in my own family, there's a person who has written a piece that employs such as a Cecily Tyson or Ben Vereen or a LeVar Burton or Louis Gossett Jr., a James Earl Jones, a Marlon Brando. The list goes on and on. He's created something so huge that he's employed people who I idolized, and I'm not one of them. So it's like that I would say is the burden of reminding yourself that what you're doing is worthwhile, what you're doing is good.
Okay, so I take my picture down. Just
the people, yes.
Yeah, I take my picture down. I'm still there. It's just that if I'm blocking the screen, somebody says, "Who is that woman?" in the middle of the picture.
Right. That's funny.
So, but I'm still here. But you're doing great. I love it when you're talking, and just keep going. Mm-hmm. But I'm gonna add to this question: how do you balance the responsibility of your family legacy to your own dreams and ambitions?
Okay, that's a great question. How do I balance it? I think I balance it in the way that I don't stop doing studying African American history. I mean, the job that I have now during the day at the Maryland State Archives as director of the study of the legacy of slavery in Maryland, after being a research archivist and being director of imaging services there, is maintaining a path that was a parallel path for me, which is to say that in my career as an actor, one of the main goals I have and still maintain a hope to achieve it to some degree is to either write, direct, produce, or act in movies about male vocalists, primary among whom would be Marvin Gaye, Jackie Wilson, and Sam Cooke. When that became a thought in my mind, I thought, well, how am I going to do that? These are real life people. I need to know how to research them effectively, authentically, especially because my uncle has written this book and is someone who has researched and has done interviews with individuals who are real people in the Playboy magazines and also with Malcolm X. So I need to be able to do research, quote unquote, the right way. That's my own quote, the right way in this sense. So that's one reason why I did not decide to stay away from Black history or genealogy for fear that people would just compare me to my uncle, because that's another road I could have taken, which is to say that I'd rather go down this other path and then not ever have those comparisons put upon me. So within that, I still help people with their genealogy. I still will answer as many questions as possible. I give talks and presentations about African American genealogy around the country. If you pay, I'll play. But anyway, but around the country, and also I write, and I've always written, and many of the things that I write, this book it's a book of poetry that I have right now, which is coming out probably in a month or two, called Fists and Rainbows. The first part is with one fist in the air. The second part is called Holla. And the first part with one fist in the air is about African American social justice issues. And that's always been something I've been interested in. So I feel like that also goes down the line of what Uncle Alex was interested in, with Roots, with the autobiography of Malcolm X, with Mama Flora's family, with all the different things that he did and he represented. It was respect and it was honoring your ancestors, your forebears, and yourself, and your grandparents and your parents, and to respect their stories, however small or large that they are. And I always try to encourage people to do the same thing, because part of it being at the archives too is that regardless of how you feel about yourself on a given day, and this is probably funny, the title of this book, a collection of speeches that I put together. My title right now is "You Are Historic on the Day You Are Born," because it relates to everybody, because all of us who are watching today have two things that make them historic. and that's a birth certificate, and that's being a part of the federal census. And as you know, the federal census for 1950 is coming out, I think, this next month. And there's going to be a third document too. There's going to be a death certificate. And these are historic documents. They are preserved for as long as there's a world. Since 1790, there's a federal census. And for Maryland, there's a birth and death record since 1875 in Baltimore City and 1898 in the rest of the counties. And we all have that to some degree wherever you were born. And so that makes you historic. Whoever is watching this today, whoever watches this in a subsequent recording or whatever, you are historic. Remember that, believe that, know that. Tell your children that. If they're having a bad day or a rough day and they feel insignificant, tell them, you are historic, Sonny. You may not believe it right now, but there's a document right now which people will be looking at 10, 20, 100 years from now. So however small you may feel right now, you are on a paper with kings and queens and presidents and senators and movie stars. You are on the same document that they are on. So I think that's part of what the journey that I've been on has allowed me to benefit from that realization, which I would not have had if I didn't decide to expand my goal of writing the stories about or creating movies about Jackie Wilson, Marvin Gaye, and Sam Cooke, and going to an archive so that I knew how to do that. That's how I know about these other records, which are something that all of us have. And that's how I think the circle keeps going, for whether you're related to somebody famous or whether you're not related to somebody famous. In the world of history, you again are historic on the day you were born. Big plug for my book, which hasn't even come out yet. So there you go.
All right. So tell us about a project or accomplishment in your career that you're most proud of. And then tell us something you wish you could have a do-over.
Okay. Okay. I guess I will start with the do-over, because the do-over is staring you right in the face on your screen. These 4 beautiful children right here, I believe, are 2 of them at least could very well be my great aunt, and one will be my great grandmother, because these 4 kids, this picture I was given by one of my aunts, because it was just my Uncle Paul, my mother's brother's wife, gave me these, of all these different pictures that they had. They gave me these pictures, and I think it's around turn of the century, 1890, so 1900, maybe early 1905 or something like that. One friend of mine, Maureen Taylor, who's a forensic archivist, she said it might be 1911, but I feel like it might be a little bit earlier than that. But anyway, so I started doing genealogy on my mother's side about the mid-90s, something like that, because I was working in Universal Studios in Orlando, Florida, and I wanted to do it because that was around the time my uncle Alex passed away, and people would always say to me, "Well, you already know your genealogy, you already know your family history." And I said, "Well, no, my mother had something to do with it too," and that was just my father's story. Is Queen on my father's side, Roots is my father's side, but my mother, believe it or not, she had parents too. So this photograph here, this image, was shared with me by my aunt, I believe, but it was verified. However, it was verified by a cousin's daughter who gave these images to me and said that, oh, these could be, or at least I thought that they could be her mother, and as I said, my great-grandmother and my great-great-aunt. My great-grandmother was named Ida Allen. We called her Kuda Mama. My great-great-aunt her sister was named Bertha, and her nickname was Beautiful because she was just a gorgeous woman from all accounts. And then my cousin's mother, who she said was their first cousin, was named Mary, I think it was Mary Alice or Mary Harris. So we believe that they are all in this picture, that these three girls are them. And then the young boy, I don't know who that is. He's probably another cousin, because they're so well dressed and they're all together. I'm thinking they're all family. However, when I started to do my genealogy, I drove all the way from Orlando, Florida to, I think, somewhere in New Jersey, where my cousin Elizabeth was living, who was like 78 years old at that time. This is, again, the mid-90s. Before I saw her, because she was being cared for by Mary Alice's daughter, Mary Alice told me when I showed her these pictures, she said, well, this is such a shame. My mother would have known all of these persons, but she died a month ago. So that is my biggest, I'd say, disappointment, is that if I had gotten in my car, if I had, I don't know what, had picked up the phone. See, again, this is so many years ago when I didn't have a cell phone that I could have taken a picture and emailed it to her. It really was a matter of getting in a car, making a phone call, describing a picture. It wasn't like the benefit that we have today, where we really can use Facebook, use Instagram, use all these social media apps that we have today, and we could communicate so quickly with each other, and they could check these things. So anybody who's trying to do genealogy now, if you have an elder relative and you have a photograph and you don't know who they are, get in touch with that individual as quickly as possible and share that picture with them and ask them if they know. If they don't know, then you know they don't know, and you don't have to beat yourself over the head like I have, because I can only guess at who these children are. Although I suspect who three of them are, I can only guess at it specifically because I waited 1 month too long. And these two children here, I'm guessing that they are also some of my forebears. Maybe they're another cousin, maybe they're another great aunt or what have you, but I don't know because I waited too long. And I don't mean that to say that I'm feeling, oh, how stupid I was, or how dumb I was, or how lazy I was, because another cliche term is you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that there was somebody else out there who might have known who the persons were in these pictures. I certainly didn't know that she was under the weather. I didn't know how old she was or how young she was. I wouldn't have known any of that. So I remember that as well when I beat myself up. But the fact that it just happened a month before is the biggest, I guess, burden I carry. The biggest, well, there's two biggest successes that I carry and I feel great about. And this is also genealogical in my mindset. Now, unfortunately, I don't have any pictures from that, but the other one I do. And that is around this same time of going through my family history, I was trying to find on my mother's father's side, reaching out to that side of the family. My mother and her father had been estranged for all of my life. So I did not know my biological grandfather at all. I literally mean that. I don't know. He could have walked up to me in the street, could have bumped into me in a subway. He could have been in the same Uber with me, and I would not have known. I did not know him at all. However, because I was trying to do genealogy, I thought I need to do it the whole way, and as I said before, the right way. And so I talked to my Uncle Paul and asked him if he knew where the grandparents were, which is like his grandparents would be, because I wasn't even trying to reach my mother's father, because he had been estranged from both my mother and her brothers. I wasn't trying to go down that path, which I knew would be challenging and perhaps uncomfortable for them to to experience. My mother had passed away. She passed away in 1988, so had already gone on. But my Uncle Paul was still alive, and he had not spoken to his father forever and ever. So I really was asking in terms of his grandparents. So cutting to the chase, I ended up getting what was the last phone number I had, and I called this number in Fairfax County, Virginia. Now, at this point, I was living in Orlando, Florida, and the person on the other end of the phone said Taco Bell. And I thought, oh, shoot, wrong number. Well, thank you so much. So I went back, and this is like mid-90s, so I'm not going online to find a phone number. I'm using the yellow pages. And so I go in there, and I think, well, that looks like the right number. The number is Hattie Wright. That was her name, Hattie Wright. And I call again, and the person says Taco Bell. And I think, gosh, this is crazy. And so my mind starts trying to figure this out. And I think, I know this is the right number. Did my great-grandmother move away, and so her number was taken over by Ma Bell into being a Taco Bell, or literally, and this is what I went through. I said, worst case scenario, money is so hard that because I knew how she was probably born in 1893, and this I think was in 1993. I thought, is my great-grandmother working at a Taco Bell? This is terrible. Is my 100-year-old, maybe she's a greeter at a Taco Bell because it's the land where she lived or whatever. And she's like, say, did you want a soft or hard taco? It's like, wow, because she's a sweet lady and they would do that. It's really what went through my mind. And then finally, I don't know if somebody else must have gotten on the phone or whatever. And they said, who are you trying to reach? And I said, I'm trying to reach Hattie Wright, and this lady said, "Oh, who are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm Chris Haley. I'm Dolores's boy, and I'm just trying to reach you because I'm trying to do family history." And on the other end of the phone, I heard this lady who was like exclaiming, "Oh, my babies! Oh, my babies! We found you! I can't believe we found you! This is wonderful! Oh my gosh!" And it turned out that was my great aunt Edna, who was my great-grandmother Hattie's daughter, and that the girl who had answered the phone and said Taco Bell was her granddaughter, who was just playing around on the phone. So that's all it was. And then Aunt Edna, I heard her sort of scuttling off to the side because she was talking to her mother, because Mother Hattie was still alive. She was 101 years old, and they were in the house together. So thank God she wasn't working at Taco Bell. She was in her house with her daughter and with her great grandchildren, and so that is a big success. I'm so happy about, because she lived 5 more years, my great grandmother Hattie, until she was 105 years old. And within that, I was able to reacquaint her with that side of the family. So she was able to see her grandson, Uncle Paul. She was able to see myself, my father, my brother. And so even though my mother had already passed away, I reconnected the family. So that was an awesome thing to be able to do, especially because that side of the family had been estranged for all of my life. The other thing is within this other picture that I have here, see if I can get to it, is that a dear friend of mine who had me do talks for her, Megan Smolinack, had asked me to take a DNA swab to check, or to help encourage other people to do so too. It's really what it came down to. So within that, we were able to find a connection online to another individual through Ancestry.com. And I'm just saying, because it was Ancestry.com, I'm not trying to give them a plug necessarily. Unless they want to pay me, then yes, I'm giving you a plug. But it was Ancestry.com. And so through this, I met the lovely, gifted, who's also a theater person, June Bath Black, who is the lady who's in this picture with me. This is in 2009. We ended up being like, I guess, DNA pen pals for a while, going back and forth about. So I think we're related 6 generations according to what this chart shows. How might we be related? And as it turns out, that the connection is that back in we've traced it to about 1850. We are related through the foreman at the plantation in, I believe, Savannah, Alabama, where Griffin Haley was a plantation owner. His foreman was named James Baugh, Baugh, which is pronounced Baff, Baff, in Gaelic or the Welsh language. June, right here, is his, I guess, his great granddaughter, because his James Baugh had relations with Sabina, who was enslaved on that plantation. She and he are my great grandparents. So June and I are cousins. We're 6th cousins. And so we ended up meeting, and we get along great. I mean, I love her and the kids. I mean, they are my family now. And we ended up meeting in 2009 at the Who Do You Think You Are live conference in London, England. And there we are in 2009 with their youngest son. This is her husband, David, over here, next to their daughter, Katie, who's going into architecture of all things. June, me in the middle, my cousin, Lynn, who's also related on this family side, Lynn Holt, and our other cousin, the youngest, who's also named Chris, although he spells his name Kris. And we all met together. This is after we did this interview on the BBC. It might be available on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure. But then we just went to some local pub, and we all ate broken bread together. And they have been back to visit a couple of times. And one of the times they visited, we all got together in Ocean City. And there we all are again. This is probably it might have been later that year when they came over to the States for vacation, and we all met in an Italian restaurant. So there we are there. So that's my other, I guess, I feel proudest of as far as from a family history genealogical point of view, is bringing our families together through DNA, because I think that's, again, something that people can do, that's available for all of us to try. Not because I'm related to somebody famous. This is something that happens because I just decided to have a DNA swab taken. Somebody else had their DNA swab taken, and we pursued a connection through that. And now we call each other several times a year. They visited us more than a couple of times, and we are family. We are family who happen to live across the seas with each other, and that's through the magic and the wonder of DNA, which again is available to everyone. And often there are sales, so you don't have to pay an arm and a leg to get a DNA test now either, which I think is very heartening to know about. You don't need to get a second job or whatever to get a DNA test. I will say that the fact that we are Black and white, that was something that never became an issue for us. However, I want people to know that I readily admit that this is probably the best case scenario. And for everybody out there, it may not be this way, but I still think it's worth it if you're looking into genealogy and you really want to find out all who are your family, because I think through this, political statement here, I think through this connection is how we can all bring each other together with our similarities instead of remaining apart because of whatever differences we have, whether they are physical, mental, or occupation or avocation. And now I'm running for office. Thank you so much. Donate to my campaign.
I couldn't agree more with that statement, though. So this is kind of a good question. How do you encourage others to tell their own stories? Why don't you answer that as you're showing the rest of your photographs? Because I know everyone is dying that you're skipping over some and they go, wait,
What is that? Who is that? And why is that? Okay, let me. I one of the key things to do, I would say, is that I'll start from the beginning where. Start at the very beginning. It's a very nice place to start. Back to Sound of Music is one of the classic musicals. Watch it. Anyway, so I think that's where we began. All right. Photographs. Photographs. Take advantage of photographs. Take advantage of the photographs that you have right now via the social media, the digital, electronic world that we all share today, most of us share today, to maybe add them if you have Google. And again, I don't get any money from them. I wish I did. But if at all possible, somewhere write down the names of these individuals and how they are related to you. If you can get an account with maybe Ancestry, Family Search, or what have you, try to write down on there with downloading or uploading these pictures what the names are of the people in the pictures. And this picture, this is my grandfather again, who you saw earlier in the picture with his four kids. My father, Uncle Alex, Uncle George, Aunt Lois, and also at the dining room table with my brother and my mother and myself. This is Queen, the elderly lady in the middle. Queen, as you know, was played by Ruby Dee in Roots: The Next Generation. She was played by Halle Berry in Queen, which came out in, I think, 1992 or 1993. Her older son, Abner, and I think the youngest daughter, Annie. It's either Annie or Julie. I think that's Annie in that other picture there. So that's an older picture of the actual Queen from who has been depicted twice on movie. That's her actual picture. And I think she passed away in 1948. So that tells you this picture is earlier than that. So make sure you put names to the pictures, because again, that you don't have to worry about that terrible story that I relayed to you about those beautiful children in the other picture, because my cousin Mary Alice and her daughter did not think to do that. So it wasn't something that was left. They saved the picture, but without the names to the pictures, then what is it? If you don't have somebody around who can tell you that you better hope you get to them before the 30 days pass by, which is what happened to me. This next picture is a picture of Alec Haley. Now, that's not really good. It's too far away for you to see. But Alec Haley is my grandfather's father. And here's another picture which is better of him. He was a ferryman, and I think he was a ferryman there in Savannah, Alabama as well. Now, in the movie, he was played by, the TV series, and he was played by two different people too. He was played by Danny Glover in Queen. That's the quickest one. He was played by somebody else in Roots: The Next Generation, but unfortunately, I don't remember that actor's name. So I'm not even going to say the wrong name, though. But he's been played twice. But this is Alec Haley. And what I want people to also take into account with this is just to reflect on, as far as what you asked earlier, Gene, how this perception or my reality of the burden and the whatever of being related to somebody famous or being a part of a family that's considered famous or whatever word you want to use because of the notice that our family legacy has. This is a picture of Alec Haley, who was a very fair-skinned individual. As even in a black and white picture, I think you can tell that. And yet in Queen, he's been portrayed by Danny Glover. Anyone who's watching this today who's seen Danny Glover, they know that he's a very dark-skinned man. Anyone who saw Roots: The Next Generation and they saw this, and they saw Dorian Haywood play my grandfather in Roots: The Next Generation, know that he was a very light-skinned man. Dorian Haywood is very dark-skinned, as is Danny Glover. So that's something that you have to be, not you have to be, but you have to come to terms with, come to grips with, when you have a family or relations who are portrayed in the media, by TV, movies, or what have you. Think about the King family. Think about the Kennedy family. Think about all the different shows where their biographies, which made the recent one about Aretha Franklin. Just think about all those things, and think about if you are a family member of that person. It just you cannot help but think that is what they look like. That is not what they look like. Now it's Meet the Ricardos about Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz. So Desi Arnaz Jr. is still alive. Lucille Ball, Lucy, what is her last name? I forget who's married, but Lucille Ball, I'm going to say Junior too, is still alive. Lucy Arnaz, too.
Yeah.
I mean, so think about that. That's a reality that people who are related to famous people, the King and Queen of England, The Crown is a very successful TV movie or TV series on, I think it's on Netflix. I really like it a lot. And then Spencer, which the actress Kristen Thomas, I think she's up for an Academy Award this year for playing that part. Imagine if you're William or if you're Harry, and then their little grandchildren, they are, I'm using the word confronted here, but you can make it a nicer word or a harsher word or whatever. They see this all the time. Their relative is being portrayed on the big screen, on the small screen, and how do you sit with that when you knew the person in real life and they're portrayed and they look either exactly like them? Is it really eerie? Or they look nothing like them, which to me, Doreen Harewood and Danny Glover, who are wonderful, wonderful, brilliant actors, look nothing like my grandfather, who I knew and lived with for early years of my life, and Alec Haley, who I only know from photographs, but still, he was a very light-skinned person. This individual is John Fulcher. He is my great-great-great-grandfather on my mother's side. He would have been the grandfather. Is that right? He would have been the great-grandfather of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, Kuda Mama, who I called Ida Allen. In that early picture with the kids, this would have been her father's father, because my great-grandmother's father was white, her mother was black. They were never able to marry. This is in late 19th century Georgia, Richmond County, Georgia. But they did live together. How do I know they lived together? It's because I found it in the 1900 census. Yeah, I think a 1900 census, and perhaps again in the 1910 census, probably 1900 census, that there's a Charlie Fulcher who's living in the census, white man by himself, or in his own residence, next to a Lizzie Hankerson, who is in her own residence with two little girls who are listed as mulatto. So to me, that indicates that that they were living as close together as they could, because they couldn't be man and wife. And the two kids, the two girls, are mulatto, which is confirming to me again that they had them together. And this is Charles Fulcher's father, John W. Fulcher, who was a colonel in the Confederate Army. I got this picture from his great daughter-in-law, who was married to John Fulcher, who was Charlie Fulcher's brother. It's crazy. I mean, it's crazy. But she gave me this picture, which is such an amazing thing, because I had never met this lady at all in my life, but I was just doing phone calls. For those who are older, who might be listening, let your fingers do the walking through the yellow pages. And I called Fulcher names. And I just said on one of these phone calls, I'm trying to find I'm doing family history, and I'm trying to find the names of these persons who I think worked for your family, because I didn't know how they would have accept if I said, because I think my family who's black is related to your family who's white, because your great great grandfather and my great great grandmother had children together. So I thought, well, let me just say that my family worked for your family. But she had been doing the family history for the Fulchers, and she said to me, almost along the lines of what my great grandmother or my great aunt Edna had said to me, "Oh, you must be talking about Uncle Charlie's kids." And that's literally how it was. Now, again, I admit that this may sound like fantasy to people. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe he's got these great stories and everything turned out fine for him. Everything. It did not, because remember the picture of the 4 kids, and I don't know their names. I can't confirm who they are. But it's a blessing that I was able to meet this lady who, and because it's not even her line, but she had completed the research, and she gave me this photograph of my great 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 grandfather, who is approximate in time frame to Chicken George, my great 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 grandfather, who lived the same time period, but on my father's side. This very pretty lady here is my mother's mother, who is Kudamama's daughter, and her name is Mother Pearl Allen, who she is probably one of the featured person of the story that I'm writing on my. Yeah, I have 3 book projects, but the story that I'm writing on my mother's genealogy, one of the main focus persons is going to be Mother Pearl, is who I called her Mother Pearl, and this is her perhaps where she worked on the steps of the building where she was, and this is a button that was formed out of a photograph that was made of her, and she was just always a very very attractive lady, and I knew her for many years of my life. She lived into, I think, 1987, so I grew up very very well and knew her very well. So that's my grandmother, Pearl Allen. As you can see that picture, that picture. This is my father, Julius, who, as I said, I've along with archival pursuits, genealogy pursuits, I'm been big into theater and performing. This is at a theater company which no longer exists, unfortunately, right now, although most of the people who have been involved are still involved in theater in the Annapolis area now. Dignity Players, which is in Annapolis, Maryland. And you can see on my father's left-hand side the poster with pictures of different productions that Dignity Players put together, and I think it's 10 years existence. I was in the first production, and I think I was in a production next to their last year, which I might have been 2014, something like that. But he had come to see me in a play called Back of the Throat. And so this is my father, who always, along with my mother might have been my biggest fan, but my father was very close. He was my biggest fan, part 2. And this is he and I, after he saw me at one of these plays that I did. This is what I guess is a classic picture of the 3 brothers, Uncle Alex, Uncle George, and my father at the family home where they grew up in Henning, Tennessee. They were there for, I can't remember which event it was for, but as you can see, they really did care about each other very much and loved each other very much. And if you remember that other picture, when we go back to where they were with Aunt Lois wasn't there at this one, but there they all are there. And here they are again. And that's before Roots came out, 1970, because Granddad passed away in 1973. And here they are again. This is probably in the 80s. I'm thinking the 80s, so it could be 20 years or so after that other picture that I showed you. That there they are, the 3 brothers. This is Uncle George at the Utopia Film Festival. I had asked him to come and be a speaker at the Utopia Film Festival, which is in Greenbelt, Maryland, and he was very kind and very nice. He's always been a great speaker, wonderful speaker. He was ambassador to the Gambia. in, I think, 1998. He was there for 4 years. He was appointed by, I think, then President Bill Clinton. And so he came and he was our guest speaker at the Utopia Film Festival, which still goes on today in Greenbelt, Maryland. This year it's going to be in November. Unfortunately, Uncle George passed away in 2015, but he was very sweet and very wonderful, like a second father to me. And I was so fortunate to have him come and represent, because I was, as I am now, executive director of the film festival. He came there to speak and just talk about how important it was for film and things of that sort. Within my film career, my theater career, this is a production I did, Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. Some of you may feel like, oh yeah, I'm digging those costumes. That's probably is that oversized coat. I'm one of the brothers. As you're looking at your screen, I'm to the far right-hand side. There's a young man named Bob Bucci who is on my back right now in that picture. So that's at the Harlequin Dinner Theater, which unfortunately no longer exists. But I was, what was my character? Naphtali. It's like, if anybody knows the song, oh no, not he. How you can accuse him is a mystery. Not him. Save me. Benjamin is easy as a tall oak tree. So anyway, so that's the song I sang in the second act. No, actually, there was only one act. So it was like the show starts and the show ends. So that was my part in Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat. This is another picture from back of the throw. Now, as you can see, I look a little bit different here because this is in rehearsals. So this is the same play that my father saw me in, but this is early in rehearsals with two of the co-stars, Dan Cavanaugh, who has his hand on my shoulder, and Mark Hildebrand, who were the main two other co-stars in that play. And later on, as we know, things change. I had thrown in my beard a little bit more and darkened my hair and also had it permed to look a little bit different, to sort of feel the character in a way. So, and that was actively declared. So that's what that picture is. This is when I was in Orlando, Florida, probably right a year or two prior to when I started my genealogical search on my mother's father's side, when I'm working for Universal Studios Florida. However, I went to Disney every now and then because Disney was very close, and I probably went there with some friends who would visit me, and they would either come to watch me perform at Universal Studios because I was one of the actors on the lot, or we would just hang out at Disney because I would get a coupon as being a fellow actor in the area, and they had these skits that you would do. And around this time, which I think is 1992, the version of Dick Tracy, which starred Warren Beatty and Madonna, was playing. So one of their skits was mocking up Dick Tracy. So there I am in yellow, mocking up some scene there. And yellow is my favorite color, by the way. I'm not wearing it tonight, but if you want to give me a gift, yeah, yellow, you can't really tell if it's in yellow. This is about what I'm doing now. I've been, at least what I've been trying to produce now, is published books. And I mentioned that the book of speeches, which I have pretty much finished. I'm trying to find a publisher now. If I don't find one soon, I'll probably try to self-publish, which is really not a bad thing. It's an option I have open to me, and that's what I did with this book. Had to self-publish. It's called Obsessions, and it's about a lot of different poems that I wrote, or as one reviewer said, poemoirs, which is like telling a story but using some poetic phrases in it. This includes poems about self-perception, includes poems about issues that were going on earlier in my life. I have 3 or 4 poems about the O.J. Simpson saga, as those of you who were aware of that in the 1990s, how controversial and how divisive that was perceived by our nation at the time. And also there's a poem called Roots, This Part of Me, which is about, as we spoke about earlier, the conflict of feelings I had about being a part of this story. And at one point, writing in the poem, you wish for the hero to escape, but the hero is you. And for him to escape, is for you not to be here. So that's in that book, which is available now on Amazon. The other book is called Until the Right One Comes Along, which is about looking for love in the right and wrong directions. And that's the book that came out a little bit earlier this year, and that was written over 10 years of pursuing, finding love, losing love, still being in pursuit of love. And that's what I think the title really does relate to, Until the Right One Comes Along. That's also available on Amazon. And the book that I really just completed and is now in the final stages of editorial review is called Fists and Rainbows, which I mentioned much earlier, with one fist in the air and holla. And my biography is right there. The picture, which is one that I had a dear friend of mine, very talented friend, John Jolie Perot, is the artistic director, and Miss Jazzy is the person who actually took the photographs. So this is something that should be coming out probably in a month or two. My publisher, I sent him my last edits today. As a matter of fact, my last edits today after the first run through. And so this will be available on Amazon as well. I'd say, this is March, April, May, probably by May or June, no later. And then I have another book, as I mentioned in the bio, called My Mind Has Many Windows, which should come out before the end of the year. So that's really where I am right now with all the different projects I'm doing and the different talks I'm doing, including a lovely one for Solderly, which I'm doing right now.
Woo-hoo. And we're so glad. So yeah, I always say, write your names on your photographs.
Yes.
And the year, if you can, and the location, or they end up in an old archive of an old house museum,
yes.
or they end up in a junk store for a quarter.
Yes.
So it loses the provenance, it loses the meaning after a while. So you don't know who these people are. So yes. I'm always preaching that. Okay, so I'm gonna thank you so much, and I'm gonna go to, before I get to a couple of questions, I'm gonna give a shout out to Trudy Telefero.
Hi, Trudy.
Who once interviewed your uncle. So she says your Uncle Alex was the very best motivator. He pushed me to find my ancestors. I feel so blessed to have met him, and double blessed to have met you.
Oh, thank you so much, Trudy.
So I had to do that. Trudy is a very special person, and a lot of our descendants and friends are here. So let's go to a couple of questions. You still have a little bit of time if you have a quick question to add to the Q&A, please. Mm-hmm. All right, I'm going to go to Jerome Spear. So Jerome is one of our descendants, as he is related to almost every descendants group in our, in Maryland. But he has a question. So, has the Haley family baton, either officially or unofficially, been passed to you? And is there someone else coming behind you who plans to keep the Haley narrative going? Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Jerome, for that question. I would say probably unofficially it's been passed to me in the active way of how I'm specifically involved in African American history in Maryland, where Kunta Kinte landed, and the county and state from which he was sold, and also because I'm working at the Maryland State Archives, which is where the record of the connection of the Lord Ligonier ship, first found on a 3x5 card by Phoebe Jacobson, who was able to help Uncle Alex locate this at the didn't call the Hall of Records, probably in the 1960s. And because of what I'm doing right now, and because of what I'm writing about and what I talk about, I would say that, yeah, I guess unofficially it's been passed along to me, although there are others who are also very involved. We have his daughter Cynthia is manning and overseeing a family Facebook page and email, which several members of the family are putting posts in. I'm supposed to be putting posts in there this month myself, but I have been so behind the ball because I've been doing different talks and things and trying to get this book out. But if you do see any posts on Facebook from the Alex Haley family, it's probably me. If it's before this month is over, and also Bill, one of his grandsons, Bill Haley Jr., who works for Disney in California, oversees the Alex Haley site, the Alex Haley family site, which has, I think, if not all, almost all of the articles that Uncle Alex ever wrote or was interviewed, or any of his writings is posted and is made electronically available on there. Bill keeps that going, and his interviews for Uncle Alex and things of that sort, that's all on there. So I would say he's also someone, and his email, my email, and I think our cousin Andrea, who's in Virginia right now, who's a writer within the area, Andrea Blackstone, and also another cousin of ours whose name is Evan, is a very talented writer. She's written articles right now for the New York Times, I think, the New York Times and something. So she's just a 20-something. She's just a 20-something, and so she's already doing some major writings right now. So I would say that she would be among the next generation. May or may not decide to keep the baton going, but she certainly is keeping the baton going as far as writing goes. And otherwise, then I guess it's me with my little gray hair that's coming here.
Okay. So the next question is from Joy Medley. I'm an amateur genealogist and curious to find voting records for 19th century African American ancestry.
Okay. Well, depending on which state you were talking about, you said Latoya, right? Latoya? So I want to make sure I'm saying the name.
This is Joy Medley.
Exactly what I said. Joy. Okay. Sorry, Joy. Yeah. It depends on where you're talking about and what county within which state you're talking about. Remember, voting wasn't allowed for Black people until after the passage of the 15th Amendment, and that's 1870. So, and even then, there's all the issues with Black codes and Reconstruction. Things were made very hard and challenging for a Black person to register to vote, and then that's a whole big other story. That said, if you're able to locate the archival institution in that state, and perhaps even in the county, if there's a historical society there, and ask them if they do have any voting records or registration cards for individuals that are saved there, and look in those, because voting records should be after the time of slavery. So you wouldn't have to go deep into slavery records. Although in Maryland, there was some voting by Black people in the 1790s, believe it or not. It was, I think, 1802 or 1803 when voting was actually specifically made illegal for Black people in Maryland. There was a short span of time when Black people actually could vote in Maryland, around 1790 to 1802 or something like that. So there's that as well. But yeah, so that's what you need to do is whichever state and or county you're looking for, see if they have voting records. And if they do, voting registration cards might be what you can go to find that documentation.
Okay, so one more question. So Jennifer Halsey, I've been fortunate to meet your Uncle Alex Haley at the first reunion in Creswell, North Carolina at Somerset Plantation, and you at the Utopia Film Festival. I try to attend every year. So you got a fan, it looks like.
Yes,
I live in... Thank you for your work. Can you discuss the cemetery project?
No. I'm kidding. I have the movie that the Unmarked, which came out. Oh, was it? Well, it came out about 2 years ago. There was a shorter version that myself and Brad Bennett, my co-director, who brought the project to me. He's really he deserves all the credit for originating this the MUI project based on research that was going on from persons in Central Virginia who were trying to preserve these cemeteries, preserve and I'm saying renovate, but renovate isn't the right word, but keep up the maintenance for cemeteries of formerly enslaved and free African Americans around the United States of America, but specifically in this area in Central Virginia. And this is ongoing in so many different places around the United States, in both southern states and northern states. And the effort is to try to identify those burial grounds and those cemeteries where people of color or Black people were buried, because in so many instances, certainly where they were enslaved as well, there's so many instances where you do not know who was really buried there. You only know that this person was enslaved on a certain farm, in a certain plantation. So you can only, quote unquote, I hate this word, but assume that they were also buried there. So where on the grounds are they buried? And can you find out anything based on records that at least indicate that they were enslaved at this certain particular farm by these certain individuals, that they probably are laid to rest somewhere in this vicinity? And it's such a challenge because along the lines of what the challenge is for any African American record during the ages of when slavery was still in existence, the resources were not there for an enslaved person or for many free Blacks, depending on their financial situation, to get an engraved stone or any marker which would have an etching on there that would last the ravages of weather or the time as time goes on and all the different experiences that we go through, or the natural weather changes that we go through. So it's something that one can look online if you want to volunteer yourself, Jennifer, for any of those things. And I know I spoke about it in the Greenbelt News Review not so long ago, that there are other places where you can volunteer your services, your time, because it is very important. And I think it's important not only from a historical point of view for people who have already gone on, but from a respect point of view for ourselves, because as I said before, there's 3 records which are historical records, which we'll all have. The birth record we already have, the census record we're already on, and there's another one which we don't want to get too soon, but there's another one that's going to also historically put us in the book of Earth, I'll say, and you will be interred somewhere, and you probably would like to have a sense that someone will know where your final resting place is. And that's why I believe, and many others believe, that identifying and preserving the condition and the whereabouts of these cemeteries is a very worthwhile effort to keep going.
Thank you, Chris. You're a joy, and I'm going to say thank you so much for sharing your stories and your insight and your life with us. And I'm going to turn it back over to Nancy.
Chris, I echo Jeannie's sentiments. Thank you. You have a complicated history. You do, and I think you've navigated some of it with grace. I mean, there are some times when you're going to find those connections. You said you were the best case scenario, and I think that's absolutely the case. There are many who may be not wanting to have that difficult conversation or what could happen with it. It might not always go as well as yours did, but there are so many connections that we don't even realize exist out there. You found some of yours, and I think, as you said, there are so many ways that we are connected, and finding those ways that we can face the realities of the past, understand the realities of the past, but move forward together. And I think you have shown how to do that. And I'm sure your Uncle Alex would be proud of the work you are continuing in his footsteps. And I just think he would be proud. And we appreciate your coming to share those stories with us tonight.
Thank you, Nancy, for inviting me.
Oh, absolutely. For all of you who are joining us tonight, we're so glad you've been part of the series. If you've missed any of the ones that have taken place, you are welcome to watch any of the ones we have archived. This will be archived, so you can, on our website, you can watch it again, tell others about it so they can watch it. Next month, we are having a special in-person Common Ground. We are going to be having a 2-day symposium, April the 29th and the 30th. It is it is free, but it is by registration. There will be a limited in-person attendance. We're hoping to find a way to send it out virtually as well, but right now I know it is in person. There will be many of our descendants who are present, and many of them are on tonight. And by the way, Alex, we have people from Phoenix and from Michigan and from Corpus Christi and from California. We had them all over the place listening tonight. Many of our descendants who are our rock stars at Solderly are going to be at this event. And I hope that many of you in the community join us for finding a way to look at our past, the realities of our past, the way it connects us, and to be able to find a way forward, a way of healing that we can come to that common ground as we talk about with our event, and as Alex, as you talked about as well. If you're a member of Solderly, thank you. If you love the work we're doing and you want to become part of the Solderly family, whether as a member or as a volunteer, we hope that you will continue with us on our journey, and we hope to see you at future presentations. Again, Alex, thank you, sir, so much. Good night, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your evening. Take care.
Chris.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Chris, I say Alex. You said Alex too many times tonight, and
I know, right. It was either Alex or Palmer, one or the other.
Okay, I'm going to start calling you Palmer from now on.
Right, I know, right. People say, "Oh, she got the inside scoop. She knows the family. She knows the family story. She knows the family name."
God, I've internalized all of your names, and now I'll be calling my husband Chris.
Right, it's hard to do. It's hard not to do.
Oh my gosh! Thank you for being gracious.
Sure.
Good
Thank
night.
you.